Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to crack open a powerful secret, the reason you struggle to learn new things. It has almost nothing to do with your talent. We're going to explore the super learning method from author Akira Iguchi, and I promise it's going to show you how.
Okay, let's start with a feeling I think we all know way too well. That frustration when you try to learn something new. You're so excited, right? You buy the books, you sign up for the course, and then just a few days later, that initial fire just kind of fizzles out. Maybe it feels like your attention span for that new hobby is like 3 minutes long. Or you read an entire chapter of a book, you get to the end, and you realize you can't remember a single thing you just read. We've all been there. And these struggles, they're universal. But they can leave you feeling like, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. But here's the big idea, the critical insight. That feeling isn't some kind of personal failure. It's not about your brain, your education, or your genes. The source material we're digging into today argues the problem is way simpler, and thankfully, a lot more solvable. It's the method you're using. So where does this all come from? Well, it's from author Akira Iguchi, a guy who calls himself a learning madman. And he became absolutely obsessed with figuring out why so many of us struggle to learn, even when we pour in so much time and money. And when I say obsessed, I mean it. This wasn't some casual hobby for him. For 20 years, he dedicated his life to this question. He was traveling the world, researching, practicing, all to deconstruct the core principles of how we actually learn effectively. And get this, he put his money where his mouth was, investing over 100 million yen, that's nearly $1 million, into his quest. And the result of all that time, all that investment? A system he distilled down into what he calls the super learning method. So the whole point, the big takeaway, is this. We have to stop thinking of learning as some fixed ability we were born with. It's not. It's a skill. And just like any other skill, whether it's playing an instrument or coding an app, it can be dramatically improved if you just use the right techniques. All right, so what's the first principle of this method? You might think it's some complex brain hack or a fancy new app. Nope. The entire foundation, the whole thing, rests on one single powerful idea, a fundamental shift in your mindset. Iguchi takes the famous 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, and he applies it directly to learning. He argues that a massive 80% of your success comes from having the right mindset. All those specific study tips, the techniques, the methods, they're important, but they only account for the other 20%. So what is this 80% mindset? Well, it really boils down to a concept from the psychologist Carol Dweck. Are you operating with a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? Someone with a fixed mindset believes talent is just something you're born with. That makes failure absolutely terrifying because it feels like a final judgment on who you are. But a growth mindset? That sees ability as something you build, brick by brick. Failure isn't a verdict, it's just data. It's a clue for what to do next. So once you really adopt that growth mindset, once you start believing that improvement is actually possible, you unlock this amazing tool, visualization. Why does this work? Because it turns out your brain is surprisingly easy to fool. When you vividly, and I mean vividly, imagine yourself performing a skill, the neural pathways in your brain fire in almost the exact same way as when you're actually doing it. And if you think that sounds a little out there, check out this famous study from the University of Chicago on basketball free throws. They split people into 3 groups. The first group practiced physically for an hour every day, and they improved by 24%. Makes sense. The second group did nothing at all, and, no surprise, they saw 0 improvement. But the third group, they only visualized making free throws without ever touching a basketball. Their improvement? 23%, almost the exact same as the people who practiced every day. That's the power of mindset in action. Okay, so a powerful mindset is the engine. But how do you actually get the car moving, right? How do you translate that belief into an actual, tangible skill? Well, that brings us to the next principle, turning all that theory into real expertise through action. Now, the author argues against that whole slow and steady learning approach that takes years. Instead, he's a huge advocate for what he calls short-term intensive learning. And the strategy is built on 5 keys. First, find a role model so you have a proven roadmap. Second, write down exactly what you want to achieve. Be specific. Then use short, focused bursts of learning to keep your energy high, review what you've learned constantly to make it stick, and find a learning partner to hold you accountable. Now, this next part, this is absolutely crucial. To actually make information stick in your brain, you need to follow what he calls the golden ratio of learning. You should spend only 30% of your time on input, reading, watching videos, listening to lectures. The other 70%, the huge majority, has to be dedicated to output. That means actually doing the thing, applying what you've learned, solving problems, or even trying to teach it to someone else. It's in the struggle of the output where the real learning actually happens. But maybe the most powerful and practical piece of advice in the whole thing is this: stop relying on willpower. Just stop. Willpower is a finite resource. It always runs out. Instead, you need to consciously design your environment to make learning the easiest possible choice, the path of least resistance. If you want to learn guitar, don't hide it in a case in the back of your closet. Leave it on a stand right in the middle of your living room. Make your good habits easy and your distractions hard. So when we put all these pieces together, the right mindset, the right actions, the right environment, what does it all add up to? Well, it fundamentally changes how you should be viewing your own potential. It means we have to completely reframe how we think about learning. It's not a chore you have to suffer through. It isn't something you were just good or bad at in school. Learning is the single most powerful weapon you have to transform your career, your skills, your income, and ultimately your entire life. The knowledge you build is the one asset that nobody can ever take away from you. And the author's final message is really simple, but it's pretty profound. We need to rediscover the joy in learning. Think about it. When we were kids, we were naturally curious. We were excited by new things. The whole point of the superlearning method is to get back to that state, where learning isn't some task you have to check off a list, but a delightful adventure. So, the keys to unlocking your brain are right here. They're in your hands. Those old limits you thought you had, they weren't real. They were just a product of using the wrong method. So the only question left is, with this power, what will you choose to learn and who will you choose to become?